On a bustling commercial street, chaos erupts as a young pregnant woman, Dong-en, tearfully accuses her boss of refusing to pay her final wages. Her heart-wrenching cries and flawless performance stir the crowd, branding her boss a ruthless profiteer. With emotions running high, the bystanders' outrage builds to a boiling point, threatening dramatic consequences. Watch how this intense scene unfolds in our gripping movie recap. Seeing this, the boss hurries outside to settle the matter. He tries to reason with our heroine, but she's having none of it, so he's forced to pay her the final payment of 5,000 won. Following this whole scene, En arrives at the end of an alley with ease, gets into a van, and drives away. There are 3 men in the vehicle from a small business company called 8 Earth Studios, an advertising company. They are Meng Qingshu, Shi Ae, and boss Kwamao Shu. As for En, she's the only customer service representative in the company. Turns out they weren't paid for an earlier service by the men, therefore En resorted to creating a scene by faking a pregnancy and riling up the crowd. Through their conversation, we learn that the Peony Company is the leader in the sauce industry. The 8 Earth Studio, which usually makes a living by accepting small projects, was lucky enough to be selected to work under Peony. However, when the company suddenly changed its management, the founder's son, Yuan, rejected their proposal and caused the studio to lose the opportunity to make a lot of money. In the next scene, we're introduced to the founder's son, Juan, who's not only intelligent but a hunk. He has just returned from overseas as the chairperson of the company, who also happens to be his mother, Mu Dan, has gotten ill. On his first day at the office, he acts like a fool, pretending not to understand the business world. His uncle, Director Lei, is the most prestigious person in the company and also the most ambitious one. On the surface, he warmly entertains his nephew, but in reality, he doesn't want him to take over the company. Yuan finally drops his act when he arrives in his office. He's actually a smart boss who believes that his uncle is embezzling company funds abroad. Xiao Yi, deputy director of the production, and Song, deputy director of marketing, are both his college classmates and close friends. The 3 of them are now working together to collect evidence so that they can clean up the company. On the other hand, we learn that Adar Studios itself owes 3 months' rent since they aren't getting any customers at the moment and resorts to her old trick. She pretends to be a pregnant woman and heads to the Peony Company. When she arrives, she unintentionally ends up helping Juan and his uncle solve a traffic problem in the parking lot. She then goes upstairs where she finds her school friend working at the front desk. They catch up for a while, after which our heroine lies that she has a stomachache. While her friend is pouring water for her, she rushes into the office to negotiate with Juan. Unexpectedly, Director Lei is also there, but En couldn't care less and immediately asks why they rejected her proposal. Listening to the 2 men's conversation, our heroine learns that Director Lei has a friend who has recently opened a company called Beijia Advertising. This is the company he chose to invest in instead of Adar Studio. Heartbroken, En drops her acting and returns to work to reveal the sad news. In the following days, Yuan and his team monitor Director Lei and the Leijia company respectively. After gathering several clues, he learns his uncle has actually been receiving bribes on the project. Enraged by this revelation, Yuan decides to finally expose him in front of everyone. He conducts a meeting and announces that he himself will be heading the company from now on as the new CEO. He also promotes his best friends, Chaoyi and Song, to directorial positions. In the next scene, Yuan presents conclusive evidence of his uncle's bribery case in front of him. This renders Director Lei speechless, essentially admitting to his guilt. Meanwhile, En decides to conduct her own investigation to expose the director. She hopes that in doing so, she will earn the respect of the new CEO, and eventually he will accept their proposal. After several days of hard work, she collects a lot of evidence and presents them in front of Yuan. To her delight, he uses them to overthrow the corrupt personnel, and finally terminates the contract with the Leijia company. At that moment, our heroine realizes that she's met him before. It turns out that during an event, En mistook him for a client, and because she had too much to drink, she vomited in his arms. That night, she thinks about all she's achieved and all the successes she's had at the studio over the years, but she knows that if she wants to earn money, she must convince Yuan to accept the company's proposal. Therefore, she goes to his office early the next morning, but Song informs her that he's in the underground garage. Our heroine then arrives at the garage where she overhears Yuan and his uncle arguing. When the matter escalates, she tries to intervene and separate them, but she accidentally ends up pushing Yuan, knocking him out. When he wakes up, he finds himself in the hospital. En stands beside him with a guilty look on her face, trying to explain that she didn't mean to hurt him. However, our hero is pissed and basically tells her to get the hell out. Now that her plan has failed miserably, En decides to try something different. She takes some flowers from the hospital's chapel and decides to visit his mother, Mudan, who happens to be admitted in a nearby room. She remembers the chairwoman liking her hand-woven sweater at a company event. Therefore, she wears the same sweater and heads there. Our heroine then uses her exceptional customer service skills and charming face to impress Mudan. As they engage in conversation, she learns that Yuan has a habit of snuggling with a stuffed toy while sleeping. Later, En returns to work and announces that she has some good news and some bad news. The good news is that she discovered Yuan likes stuffed animals and that she may be able to seduce him. The bad news, however, is that she and Yuan had an unfortunate first meeting where she threw up on him. Despite this, she's determined to get their proposal accepted. The following day, she goes to the peony company with 2 bags of stuffed animals. As soon as our hero spots her, he becomes curious about the toys she's carrying, and takes this opportunity to show the good sides of her studio and how it's impacting the lives of other people. After hearing her out, Yuan finally decides to accept her proposal. However, there is a catch. He asks her to work in the cleaning department so he can check her sincerity. Although En is taken aback by this strange request, she accepts and starts working at the company. She cleans the building diligently, allowing her to receive compliments from everyone she meets. The next day, Yuan holds a meeting with representatives from various advertising companies, including Ater Studio. He announces in public that he will personally check the content of the proposal drafts and provide corresponding remuneration. When they learn that the remuneration pitch is pretty high, En's colleagues at Ater Studios work tirelessly to create new plans for their proposal. However, Yuan always finds faults in them and makes them change and optimize the plans repeatedly. One day, En overhears the employees at the peony company talking about Yuan's acceptance of the Jiaqing company's proposal. This makes her very upset as her team members have tried everything at this point. Just then, she receives a text message from Mudan, giving our heroine an idea. She goes to the hospital on the pretext of visiting her, and as they engage in conversation, she deliberately reveals that Yuan has decided to hire the Jiaqing company. Mudan is upset that this company's quotation is very high, so she calls her son to the hospital directly. Upon arrival, Yuan is taken aback by the rumors as he's never considered that option. This makes our girl feel very awkward, but she's also relieved. In the following days, Ader Studio continues to work hard day and night. Eventually, they come up with a plan that they believe might crack the deal, and then arrives at the peony company to deliver the renewed proposal in person, but at that moment, the power in the building suddenly shuts off. Since our hero is scared of the dark, he cowers in his office. Fortunately, before anyone can see him in this state, En shows up and helps him regain his composure. She then takes this opportunity to hand over the final proposal to him before heading home. That night, she finally receives the call she's been waiting for. The peony company has decided to sign a contract with Ader Studio, making everyone happy. The next day, En begins working at one of the workstations and becomes a spokesperson for her company. One evening, she accompanies her friend Hai Mei to a bar for a drink. They talk about their personal lives and the projects they're currently invested in. Coincidentally, Yuan and Song are also at the same bar. The latter is curious about the relationship between his friend and En, as they seem to have been pretty close at the office. In response, our hero reveals that when he returned to China 3 years ago, he attended a party organized by his company. At that time, En was working as an intern in one of his subsidiary companies. At the party, Yuan realized that there was something wrong with the wine. En, who was unaware of it, drank way too much and eventually ended up throwing up on him. The following day at work, Yuan unexpectedly informs En to prepare for her advertising presentation. Our heroine, who has never presented before, quickly jots down a draft of her speech, remembering the key points in the plan. Fortunately, she doesn't have stage fright and ends up delivering a good speech. This impresses everyone, including Yuan, and they applaud her performance. The next day, En volunteers to cater to a client arriving from abroad. The client is Mr. Zhang, a potential investor for Peony Company. His organization wants to promote community unmanned convenience stores across the country, so his decision is related to the future development of the company. In the next scene, En and Yuan arrive at the airport to pick him up. Initially, they think that Mr. Zhang is a very serious person, but they're completely taken by surprise. Being so down-to-earth and approachable, he takes out 2 cans of pickles from a nylon bag and gives it to them as a gift. Later, during dinner time at the hotel, En discovers that a chairman named Suki from a rival company, Sanjiao Group, is also joining them. When he arrives at the place, it's evident that he and Yuan aren't on good terms. Suki also finds our heroine very suspicious, so he sends someone to investigate her background. In the meantime, employees at the Peony Company learn that En went to receive Mr. Zhang, so they assume that she and Yuan may be dating. Back at the hotel, and makes sure that Mr. Zhang receives the best of amenities and that his stay is beyond satisfactory. Seeing her work so hard, he's greatly impressed. As a result, he promises to seriously consider investing in the Peony company and working together with them. One day, Anne gets a call from her best friend, Jaime, who works as a host at a dating club. She wants her to come to the hotel, where they are currently organizing a speed dating game, and help her with the client. Our heroine agrees right away, as she feels free at the moment. Unexpectedly, Yuan and the others also happen to be at the same hotel for a meeting. Later, Jaime gives them an invitation to the speed dating game. Yuan doesn't seem to be interested at all, but when he hears that Anne is also inside, he walks in without hesitation. A beautiful girl sits before him, but his eyes are on Anne. In the meantime, Anne is occupied with several clients who are trying to impress her with their charm. When it's his turn to change seats, Yuan quickly sits in front of her. The two then chat about work for 10 minutes, and they seem pretty content. Near the end of the event, Jaime walks up on stage to draw the lucky guest who will be given a chance to make a beautiful ceramic hand mold with the girl of his choice. The lucky winner turns out to be none other than Yuan, and he chooses Anne to be his partner, and the two end up making a beautiful hand model of themselves. The following day, she gives her lovely hand model to Yuan, and in exchange, he settles her company's financial problem. Elsewhere, Suki from Sanjiao Group is working on securing the investment from Mr. Zhang. He comes up with a plan to bribe Yuan's best employees, Song and Chowie, in order to get them on his side. However, this plan fails miserably when they refuse to be bought with money. They also make it clear that they will never leave their best friend and boss under any circumstances. One morning, Zhang and Yuan are jogging together when the latter suddenly feels a pain in his chest. This worries him because his dad died due to heart failure. Meanwhile, Mr. Zhang visits Adar Studios and decides to invest in it. He believes the company, despite its small stature, has a promising future because of employees like N. Suki soon learns about this and plans to target N instead. He later visits Adar Studios and attempts to bribe the employees. However, our heroine refuses to participate in any kind of bribery and politely rejects his handsome offer. Regardless, Suki continues to torment her by sending flowers to the office. This creates a stir among the employees at Peony Company, and they start gossiping about Suki and An's budding relationship. The rumor eventually reaches Yuan's ears, and he is clearly upset by it. Later, he confronts N and demands clarification. Our heroine reveals that Suki is trying to win her over for personal gain. She even hands him her phone and explains that they only talked once over call. Yuan notices that she saved his number as Iron Tortoise. N quickly apologizes and asks whether she can invite him for dinner to make up for things. Yuan obviously can't reject her offer, so they end up going to a downtown restaurant, where they enjoy some delicious seafood. In the meantime, Suki has been brainstorming on ways to get N on his side and secure Mr. Zhang's investment. He visits our heroine the next morning and asks her to join him in choosing a location for an upcoming advertising event. It's revealed that during this event, all the companies that produce sauce will be pitching their products to investors. It'll be a tasting event of sorts, where the attendees will be tasting the sauces made by different companies. N hesitantly agrees to his request, and the two reach the location by riding a scooter. Yuan has already arrived there, but before he can misunderstand the situation and clarifies what's going on. Next, the trio walks around the venue and decides that it's the best spot for the upcoming advertising event. Later that night, Suki comes up with a plan. He wants his assistant to infiltrate the Peony Company's warehouse and spill their entire stock of sauce. The scene then shifts to the day of the event, where Yuan learns of the unfortunate news. He's certain that it's Suki's doing, but the top priority right now is to transport the sauce from the company as soon as possible. In order to buy more time, and organizes a special game where the presidents of various companies cook rice on the spot. Suki and Yuan each make a delicious egg fried rice based on their skills. Meanwhile, Song and the others deliver the sauce in time, and the competition ends successfully. That night, Anne sends a text to Yuan asking him to hang out together on the weekend. She wants to go to a hot springs resort where they can relax and have some fun. Our hero readily agrees, and he starts coming up with some sweet scenarios in his mind. The following day, the results of the competition are announced. Based on the performance of each company, Mr. Zhang chooses to sign a contract with Peony Company and also invest in 8-hour studios. This sends their couple into a state of excitement, as their hard work has finally paid off. When the weekend arrives, an excited Yuan dresses up early and rushes over to the resort with great expectations. Much to his disappointment, It turns out to be a company weekend retreat. He actually thought it would be a romantic date. In the next scene, the fun activities begin, and they start playing games together. Later, as Song and Chowie are hanging out, it's revealed that the latter used to be in a relationship with Yuan, but they broke up when they realized they didn't feel the spark between them. Song is curious about who she has feelings for now. In response, Chowie suddenly rushes towards him and kisses him on the lips. This sparks a new chemistry between them, and they end up being intimate with each other. After the retreat, Yuan takes the initiative to drive En home. When they arrive in front of her house, she receives a call from Changjiangshua Orchard, informing her that the orange tree she planted with her ex-boyfriend, Jiamu, has finally grown. This makes our girl both happy and sad, as she certainly doesn't want to see her ex again. But the very next morning, Jiamu makes a surprising entry at the 8-Ear studio. As the CEO of Xiangling Group, he hopes to reach cooperation with them by working on future projects together. Everyone knows that he's En's ex-boyfriend, and also a scumbag who cheated on her. Naturally, En has no intention of cooperating with him, but when she sees that the contract is worth 1 million yuan, she changes her mind. At this moment, Jiamu then reveals that he not only wants to work with the studio, but he also wants to patch things up with En. He asks her to give him a chance so that he can prove that he's a changed man. He then proposes that they visit the orchard and see the orange tree they planted together. En definitely doesn't want to reconcile with him, but she agrees to visit the orchard. When her colleagues at the studio learn about this, they fear she might get bullied by him, so they decide to follow her and ensure they have her back. The following morning, the two arrive at the orchard and stroll around, but soon, the CEO receives an urgent call from work and leaves, and this makes her hero remember all the times he abandoned her in the past. She then begins picking oranges on her own, and is soon joined by her friends. After they finish, En decides to stay for a little while longer, so her friends wave goodbye and return to the office. As soon as they depart, Yuan arrives at the orchard. Turns out, Jaime had already informed him about this meeting. En surprises him, but he casually claims that he was just passing by. They then go for dinner, where she briefly mentions how she met her ex-boyfriend. According to her, they were college classmates, and they often did projects together, which made them fall in love naturally. But the little bastard cheated on her with a woman from a wealthy family. During her sad times, she met Kwa Mao Su, her boss at Adorf Studios. He helped her recover from her depression, and also gave her a job. Since then, our heroine has been working for him at the advertising company. Yuan is touched by this story, and genuinely feels bad for her. The two then continue to chat for a while, before returning home. The following day, Yuan sees Jiamu at his company. His secretary informs him that the guy is there to discuss business, and that he's already married, and a son-in-law to the famous Xiangling Group. That night, Jiamu calls En and says that there's a problem with her contract, so he asks her to come by to a nearby bar immediately. Our heroine is initially hesitant, but when he threatens to cancel the contract, she agrees. Just as she's about to leave, she receives a call from Yuan, so she tells him about the situation. In the next scene, she arrives at the bar hoping for a meaningful conversation, but he instead starts humiliating her in front of everyone. He even goes as far as pouring wine on her clothes. When our heroine has had enough, she slaps him hard across the face. The idiot tries to retaliate, but Suki, who also happens to be at the same bar, intervenes just in time to stop him. Shortly after, Yuan also arrives at the scene, and warns Jiamu to be more respectful to his girlfriend. He then escorts her out of the bar and takes her to a restaurant, where they spend some quality time together. The following day, Jiamu follows his mother-in-law and wife to Piani company to discuss cooperation. Reality hits him hard when he realizes that the boss of the company is none other than Yuan. He remains shocked the entire meeting and fails to utter a word. After the meeting, Yuan announces that they will consider their proposal after a thorough analysis. The mother-in-law then invites him over for dinner, to which she accepts without hesitation. This is because he's planning something cunning against Jiamu. That night, Yuan and En head to dinner as a couple. As they chat, they realize that Jiamu is just a puppet to his in-laws. He has to do whatever they say, and essentially kiss their ass. During their ride home, En says that her ex-boyfriend is certainly not a good man like he boasted the other night at the bar, and he has to grovel and betray himself every day. Yuan then asks her what kind of person she wants to be. Our heroine says that she hopes to be as capable as him, and persist in her dreams. In the meantime, Song and Chowie continue seeing each other and having fun together. The following day, Yuan calls En to discuss a new advertising design plan. At the meeting, the R&D department announces that they will produce several new products based on the taste, necessitating the revamping of the related advertising strategy. and then notes the key points and promises to try her best to deliver the draft within 2 weeks. The scene then cuts to New Year's Eve, where Yuan drives down to Adar Studios, where En and her friends are celebrating. Kwa Maoshu and the others warmly welcome him, and they enjoy the evening joyously. After dinner, Yuan hands her an invitation to the company's annual meeting. She's over the moon to be a part of it, so she gladly accepts. Next, Yuan's mother Muten is finally discharged from the hospital. En comes to visit her with gifts, which of course wins over the mother. Later, Yuan takes her heroine to choose a dress for the company's annual meeting. She tries on several outfits and finally finds a white gown that satisfies her. Just when Yuan is about to pay for it, she discovers that the dress actually cost 98,000 yuan. This alarms her, so she insists on paying for it herself. However, when he leaves first because of urgent matters, she puts the dress back. Afterward, Jaime brings over a bunch of dresses, which contains the white dress. En guesses that Yuan was the one who bought them, and her friend nods in agreement. Jaime then asks if they're dating, but our girl claims that they're only working together as business partners. On the day of the event, En is clad beautifully in the white gown, leaving our handsome hero speechless. After some formal activities, she heads over to the wine section and tastes different flavors. When she starts to feel a little dizzy, she goes out to the garden to get some fresh air. Yuan follows her there and engages her in conversation. They then dance for a while until she starts feeling uncomfortable in her stomach. Our hero rushes her to the bathroom, unaware that Xiaoyi and Song are making out in the next stall. After Yuan and En leave, Song suggests that they should come clean about their relationship as he's tired of hiding from others. However, Xiaoyi refuses and says that they should stop it here. She then abruptly leaves him, breaking his heart. Meanwhile, En is still a little tipsy on the ride back home, so she praises Yuan for being handsome from a certain angle. Out of nowhere, she then kisses him several times, expressing that she has now claimed his lips. Our hero was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, but he doesn't stop her. After dropping her home, he thinks about the kiss, wondering whether he should establish a romantic relationship with her. Early in the morning, En wakes up to find herself tied up. It turns out Jaime did this to stop her from acting like a crazy drunk. Our heroine then remembers that when she used to get drunk, she would beat on everyone in the studio and make fun of them. Now, she's worried that she might have done something to Yuan. Therefore, she rushes to the peony company to apologize to him. Yuan is currently immersed in the melodies of love, but when he learns that En has forgotten what happened last night, his expression suddenly changes. Just then, his mother walks in and angrily asks why he discontinued all her classic sauces and replaced them with his gold medal sauces. Yuan reveals that after looking at the numbers, the classic sauce sales have been declining in recent years. Furthermore, their new sauce immediately filled a void for a healthier recipe that's more in line with modern taste. It was evident that the classic sauces weren't meeting the needs and the tastes of the young people. But since Muten has a personal attachment to the classic sauces, she emphasizes that it was significant to her. Seeing the two arguing, En comes up with an idea. She uses the two kinds of sauces to make fried rice, and brings them to Muten to taste. Yuan is also with his mom at this moment, and he watches the two chat outside the door. Shortly after, Muten tastes the rice and concludes that the gold medal sauce is indeed more delicious than the classic one. This makes her realize that she's not evolving with the younger generation. Later, En and Yuan walk through the local market and learn that although the merchants still use the classic sauce, most of them use the gold medal version. Our hero is aware that he's convinced his mother on his behalf, so he drafts a new contract plan afterward. While promoting the gold medal sauce, he decides that the company will maintain a small amount of classic sauce production and give it to customers in gift boxes. The plan is loved by everyone, especially his grateful mother. He then approaches her and says it's only possible because of En. That evening, Yuan finally decides to express his feelings for her. He takes her to an amusement park, sets off fireworks on the snowy night, and confesses his love to her. Unfortunately, En rejects him without any explanation. When Jaime learns about this later, she thinks her friend has made the wrong move, and then becomes distraught, and she struggles to sleep that night. The next day at work, she decides to put her personal feelings aside, and goes to report to Yuan about shooting commercials. As of right now, he has to make a choice between director Su, who has won multiple awards, and director Liao, who specializes in filming commercials. Just as En is about to leave, our hero notices blood stains on her pants. He guesses that she must have had her period, and quickly takes off his coat to tie around her waist. After she rushes to the bathroom, Yuan even sends his secretary to provide her with sanitary napkins. The next morning, En dry cleans the coat, and decides to return it to him. When she enters his office, she sees him sleeping on the couch. Just when she's about to wake him up, he suddenly hugs her in his sleep. Seconds later, Yuan awakens and quickly releases her from his arms. He tries to explain that he didn't mean to touch her, but N tells him not to worry. Our hero then says that he's examined director Su's works and believes that he's a director with strong ideas and would make an ideal candidate to shoot the company's advertisements. With this approval, N contacts director Su and decides to shoot the commercials in Xingyang village. It turns out she grew up in this village and has a lot of memories there. She goes there with the director to make some arrangements, but sadly their car breaks down halfway and it starts raining heavily. In the meantime, Su learns that P&E company has started shooting commercials, so he contacts his internal agent. He then orders him to sabotage the project. Back at the P&E company, Yuan begins to stress out when he is unable to contact N. When nothing comes to his mind, he decides to travel to Xingyang village on his own. Meanwhile, N gets out of the car and starts searching for a signal so that she can make a call. While she's busy doing that, someone suddenly pushes her down the hillside. Yuan arrives shortly after and finds N who's fallen down the hill. He quickly helps her to his car and tells her to put on some dry clothes first. He then turns on the heat and asks her why she didn't call. She explains that she couldn't get a signal on her phone because the weather in Xingyang village is unpredictable. Director Su decides to postpone the shoot for now. The group then heads to a local inn where they're warmly welcomed. Since there's only one spare room, everyone has to share it. Yuan finds it difficult to sleep as the rest of the guests are snoring loudly. When he looks at N's bed, he finds it empty. This worries him, and he goes outside only to find her checking the new shooting plan. Yuan then pours her a cup of hot water and reminds her to rest. When N finishes checking the plan, she lays on the table and quickly falls asleep. Our hero then whispers to her in admiration. He knew that she was very kind and hardworking from the very first moment he saw her. In his eyes, N is like a treasure, dazzling and worth exploring. Early the next morning, Yuan urges her to think about who pushed her down the hill. Our heroine can't remember his appearance, but she could vaguely see a figure from behind wearing a raincoat and a hat. Hearing her description, Yuan thinks of Suki, who has a competitive relationship with the peon company, and suspects that this incident might be related to him. Later that day, N goes to the elementary school where she studied, and Yuan decides to follow her. The two end up exploring the school and sitting in her old classroom. This is when N opens up about her feelings and the reason why she rejected him. She's afraid that others would gossip and say she relies on connections to secure top projects for 8 Earth Studio. Hearing this, Yuan asserts that he will make sure that his employees don't gossip behind her back. He then proceeds to ask her out once again. N is completely moved by his kindness, so she finally agrees to be his girlfriend. However, she suggests that they keep their relationship a secret for now. The next morning, the weather shows signs of clearing up. N is still sleeping while Yuan hugs her tenderly. He cannot stop looking at her lovely face. Just then, Director Su comes in to notify them about the filming today. He sees the couple getting pretty close, so he awkwardly turns around and leaves. Later, they learn that the actress who was supposed to be in the commercials has bailed. At the same time, Yuan's mother arrives with several employees. This gives our girl an idea. She suggests that Mudan be the actress for the commercials. Although hesitant at first, Mom eventually gives the green light and starts rehearsing her lines. Just then, a group of people show up to stop the shooting, claiming it's affecting the rest of the locals, and decides to handle the situation. However, a dispute soon breaks out. It leads to violence, and Yuan takes several punches to protect her. Thankfully, the cops arrive in the nick of time, forcing the thugs to retreat. Yuan then rightfully guesses that these attackers are not villagers, but people sent by someone who wants to sabotage their plan. After the shoot is successfully completed, the crew packs up and prepares to leave. But Yuan doesn't want to leave N, so he pretends to be unwell. He claims that he has been feeling weak ever since the attack by the thugs. N understands his situation, so she invites him upstairs for a rest. One thing leads to another, and they end up sharing a romantic kiss. But just as they're about to take the next step, Yuan suddenly stops, thinking N's not ready. He's worried that it'll scare her, so he picks up his clothes and leaves. Our heroine is confused by his behavior, and she starts thinking about what could have gone wrong. Later that day at a meeting, Mudan is very satisfied with the finished commercial. With her approval, the team prepares for a subsequent launch and promotion. After work, N and Yuan go to a popular barbecue restaurant for dinner. While waiting in line outside, they suddenly discover that the employees from Peony are also arriving there. This scares the couple, so they quickly make a run for it. They then decide to buy vegetables and make their own dinner at home. Yuan, who appears to be passionate about cooking, prepares a table full of sumptuous meals. That night, N decides to make a move on him by deliberately trying to get him drunk. However, she ends up getting drunk first. She then sits on her boyfriend's lap, hugging his neck and asking him to stay the night. Yuan understands the assignment and they proceed to do their thing. Early the next morning, he goes off to work with a huge smile on his face. In the meantime, Suki becomes very mad when he sees that the recent ad has become an internet sensation. If Peony continues to go like this, the market share they have worked so hard to capture will be completely wiped out. Elsewhere, the Earth studio is really short on manpower, so they decide to recruit new employees. Due to the low salary and no commission, the first few interviews don't go well. But then, a young woman named Lan Jinjin agrees to work, so she is immediately hired by An. On the other hand, Chao-yi starts developing feelings for Song when he looks after her health. She realizes that he really cares about her, so the two decide to patch up their relationship. That night, An takes the new recruit Jinjin to check some important documents and warns her that the job of customer service is not as simple as imagined. Their primary role is to build a bridge between the company and Party A, which is very important. Later, when Jinjin prepares to call it a day, she bumps into Yuan. He has come to deliver food for his girlfriend. She then hides behind the door and eavesdrops on their conversation. Yuan gives N the supper, suggesting they disclose their relationship to the public. However, she politely refuses, and they end up having supper together. In the meantime, Suki comes home a little late and is scolded by his father. It's at this moment that we learn that he and Jinjin are cousins. She volunteered to work at 8R Studios to learn more about the Peony company and report it to him. The young woman feels that the studio is in poor financial health and not worth the trouble. However, Suki reminds her to stand up for their family business no matter what. Back at 8R Studios, the boss, Kuyamaoshu, sees Yuan and N hugging each other downstairs. He's curious about why their relationship is not disclosed. He assumes it's most likely Yuan who refuses to make it public because he's not serious about the affair. Therefore, to prevent N from suffering a heartbreak, Kuyamaoshu and the others have a private chat with her. They solemnly tell her that she must not be led by Yuan. Our girl reluctantly reveals that she's the one who doesn't want to make it public, but now that she's ready, she wants everyone to join her for dinner tomorrow. The following evening, Yuan arranges a private room to treat all 8R members to dinner. He promises them that he will love N unconditionally. Kuyamaoshu and the others are very pleased to hear this. After dinner, as N is giving a goodbye hug to her man, her parents unexpectedly arrive at the scene. They're surprised to see her with an unknown man. Just like any parents would do, they start bombarding our hero with several questions. However, she lies and says he's the driver for a president of a rich company. She's still not ready to disclose their true identity because they're from different backgrounds. Afterward, Mom pulls her into a room and asks if she and Yuan are already living together. Although our heroine repeatedly denies it, she can't hide from Mom's knowing eyes. Thankfully, Mom is quite open-minded and just reminds her to take safety measures. In the meantime, Suki learns from his cousin that Yuan is planning to open a buffet bar, so he decides to sabotage this project as well. The following day, N takes her parents to dine at a fine restaurant. She wants to spend the entire day with them and make them feel special. But to her shock, Yuan and the other Peony employees also coincidentally arrive there. Seeing his expensive clothes, the parents are convinced he's not a driver. Therefore, Yuan drops the act and finally reveals himself as the CEO of the Peony company. He claims that he loves N a lot and will always be by her side. However, the parents are skeptical about his intentions, believing that rich guys are up to no good. Later, all the middle and senior management employees of the Peony company gather to discuss the bar project. Muden proposes that they make the facilities top-notch and that they stand out amongst their rivals. Considering that the previous cooperation with Adar Studio was pretty good, she suggests that the company be asked to take charge of this project as well. That night, Yuan sends a message to inform N about the good news. He also asks whether her parents like him, but she suggests he give them more time. In the morning, she goes to meet Muden in person and thanks her for the exciting new opportunity. In the next scene, we see Kuyamaoshu and the others excited to start their project. They also manage to secure a contract with a company named Dongshi, which is a subsidiary of Suki. Meanwhile, Jinjin remembers that her cousin has asked her to see the contents of the contract, so she steals it and sends it to him. Days later, she also provides him with a supplementary agreement between Adar Studio and Dongshi. Jinjin seems to be anxious and worried, which makes Suki realize that she genuinely cares about her Adar colleagues. So he promises that he will never do anything to harm Kuyamaoshu and the others. Elsewhere, when our hero learns that N is currently on her period, he quickly comes over to take care of her. He pours water for her, washes her clothes, and takes off her socks. Mom and Dad are genuinely impressed and realize he's a good guy after all. Later, the couple personally sees off her parents, who are going on a trip. We then see Muden, who is still focused on the buffet bar. She believes that for the success of the project, securing someone to head the planning department is crucial. So she reaches out to Lillian, the daughter of an old friend. Turns out, this woman and Yuan grew up together, and she has recently returned from studying abroad. Lillian makes a grand entrance in the next scene, and goes directly to visit Mutant. The latter is delighted to see her, and invites her to share a meal of dumplings at home. The following morning, Lillian assumes the role of planning department director at Peony Company. In an attempt to win over the employees, she resorts to providing them with gifts. Meanwhile, En is delegating Jinjin to handle her tasks on time. While she's busy teaching her, she notices Lillian entering Yuan's office. Though slightly taken aback, she quickly regains composure and leaves the building. The next day, En accompanies Mutant, Yuan, and Lillian on a field trip to purchase ingredients needed for the bar project. Mama intends to bring her son and Lillian together, so she sends them to a different shop. Meanwhile, the new girl wants to climb the corporate ladder, and also likes Yuan romantically. She tries to seduce him through their conversation, but he ignores all her advances. He instead drags En to a small store where he buys her a pair of beautiful rings. Lillian watches them from afar and realizes that they're actually in a relationship. Soon after, En's parents return from their trip, bringing her many local products. Mom then notices that she's wearing a brand new necklace. When asked about it, our heroine shyly says that Yuan proposed to her. Mom is certainly surprised, but En ensures that he doesn't care about their contrasting background. At the same time, Mutant also discovers Yuan's ring necklace around his neck. After questioning, she learns that he's actually in love with En, and that he used a plastic ring to propose to her. Mom is delighted with the revelation, as she believes En is a really nice girl. She admits that if she'd known about their relationship, she wouldn't have pressured him to be with Lillian, but she also complains that he should have proposed with a proper ring. Mutant then decides to take matters into her own hands, and buys an expensive diamond ring. She then visits En and gives it to her personally. Our humble heroine thinks it's too expensive, so she hesitates to accept it. While they're talking, En's parents also arrive home. Mutant takes this opportunity to have a family dinner together. At the dinner table, she is very enthusiastic and praises En profusely. She even decides to book a wedding venue for the young couple and give them a gift of 1.2 million yuan. However, En admits that she never thought about getting married so soon. Yuan also arrives at the scene, and the couple decides to get engaged now. In the meantime, Suchi's uncle Mr. Yuan, who is also one of the co-founders of the Shanjiao Group, learns that his nephew tried to copy the concept of the bar project from the Peony Company. This enrages him, so he decides to find someone else to take over the company. Next, Mama Mutant, with the help of Lillian, begins planning for the engagement. The latter is certainly unhappy with it, but since she has corporate goals, she obliges to her official duties. At one point, she checks the progress of the decorations, deliberately making things difficult. She vents her anger at the 8ers studio, scolding them for being too slow and finding faults. When Cuomosu can't tolerate her anymore, he proceeds to argue with her. But just then, he loses his footing and falls down the stairs. He hits the back of his head badly on some stone bricks, knocking him out. Fortunately, he's rushed to the hospital, where the doctors reveal that the injury is not serious. The scene then cuts to the engagement day, where En looks absolutely stunning in her white gown. Yuan is enchanted by her beauty, and he can't keep his eyes off her. Meanwhile, Lillian purposely volunteers to be the host and starts lashing out at her girl. She accuses her of using the CEO to climb the corporate ladder. In response, Yuan doesn't scold her. He simply goes to the stage and confesses his love for En in front of everyone. Days later, the bar project finally takes off, and the couple accompanies Mutant to participate in a ribbon-cutting ceremony. At this time, En receives a call from her colleague at 8ers Studios and learns that Dongxi Company has gone to court to sue them because of the missing contract and undue work. As Cuomosu is still recovering at the hospital, everyone can only return to the studio to gather information before responding. The situation makes Jinjin pretty uncomfortable, as she was the one who stole the contract. When she can't bear the guilt any longer, she decides to reveal her true identity and how she's been working for Suki. Everyone is shocked by her confession, but they have bigger problems now, as the Dongxi Company is threatening to sue them for millions. Thankfully, the studio manages to acquire an investor who is willing to provide funds for their dire situation. The investor turns out to be En's colleague's father, who runs a big corporation. Meanwhile, there are discussions online about En saying she's a Cinderella marrying into wealth. Some are jealous, while others express actual anger. Our heroine understandably feels a little down about this. When Yuan reads the online post, he suspects that the criticisms are too detailed and clear, so he thinks that the person behind this is someone close to them. In the meantime, Suki is given a long vacation by his uncle, Director Wan, who forces him out of the company in disguise. Hateful rumors continue to spread about En, slandering her as a manipulator. They claim that she sleeps with multiple men to get ahead. As a result, she is ridiculed by passerbys in the hospital when she goes to visit Kwamaoshu. Yuan grows increasingly worried about her and wants to take her away from the limelight, but En decisively refuses, knowing she hasn't done anything wrong. One evening, Lillian and Yuan arrive at a restaurant where they start talking business with an investor. At this time, that clever bitch makes Yuan drink a lot of wine, causing him to feel tipsy. She then takes him back to her home and lies that she's En, but our hero's not fooled. The following morning, Yuan awakens to find Lillian in pajamas, asserting that she won't disclose to anyone what happened between them, but he confidently asserts that she's messing with the wrong person. He's also aware that the person behind the online rumors is Lillian. With a serious expression, Yuan then cautions her to stop her actions, otherwise she will face consequences. As days pass by, En is greatly affected by the growing online abuse. This also makes her uncertain about the direction of her relationship with Yuan. One night, she finds it hard to sleep as her mind is flooded with every detail of her relationship with him. When morning comes, she heads to her favorite bun shop and learns that Yuan has also been there and left numerous notes. Our heroine is deeply moved and can't help but burst into tears when she sees several post-it notes left by him. In them, he mentions how much he loves her and thinks about their future. En then rushes over to him, and they finally decide to face the hurdles together. In the following days, Yuan accumulates evidence about the rumors and hires a lawyer to negotiate with Lillian. When she learns about this, she personally visits En and proposes a compensation of 500,000 yuan for mental damages. However, our heroine declines, saying money isn't everything for her, and she also hates Lillian for using her wealth as a means to resolve everything. The following day, the backlash case is finally resolved, and En receives several apologies from netizens who previously slandered her. As for Lillian, she prepares to leave the country and fly to France. Turns out she's already secured a spot at a large French company and intends to marry the boss. In the meantime, Suki, having been given a vacation from his company by his uncle, decides to establish his own urban farm. The project is supported by his ill father, who believes that his son has finally been humble. Suki presents a resignation letter to Uncle Yuan indicating that he's unsuitable to continue working for the Sanjiao Group. The director doesn't explicitly ask him to stay, but doesn't let him leave either because Suki knows a lot about his illicit activities. The next day, an employee appears at Peony Company and confesses that he was instructed by Suki to deliberately sabotage the sauce tasting party and steal company information. He is now willing to serve as a witness against him. Yuan chooses not to call the police and arrest him, but he announces that the employee will be suspended without pay. Moreover, before the matter is resolved, he needs to report on time every day. After an investigation, En and Yuan share the same suspicion. Why wouldn't an employee choose to report Suki after he left the Sanjiao Group? They assume that someone above him is trying to bring him down. The couple then decides to find the true orchestrator behind all this so they can avoid a potential crisis. Elsewhere, Song arrives at the warehouse to inspect the raw materials as usual. The place's owner informs him that the new batch of beef has recently arrived in suspicious boxes. In the meantime, Suki continues to face problems as his fellow investors start distancing themselves one by one. This forces him to contact Yuan for help, and the latter agrees to meet. The two then talk for hours and decide to team up against their common enemy, Director Yuan of the Sanjiao Group. In the next scene, Suki manages to track down the employee who works for Yuan. He tortures him and gains useful information about his uncle's next moves. That night, Yuan gathers Ong, Song, and Chowie for an important announcement. He states that the Sanjiao Group and the Peony Company have been competing for years. It turns out that Director Yuan has often acted behind their backs, and Suki was just a pawn in his game. So Yuan wants to expose the director's corrupt actions once and for all. He reminds everyone that the best defense is to attack, and the enemy of his enemy is his friend, proudly referring to Suki. As he finishes speaking, the doorbell suddenly rings, and Suki arrives in front of the house, and is initially bothered by his presence, but she decides to keep her personal resentment aside and work on the solution. Through Suki, everyone learns that in the early hours of the next morning, Yuan has planned to infiltrate Peony's company warehouse, mix 3 tons of low-priced meat with normal meat, and send them to the processing plant. His main goal is to defame Peony and eventually gain market share. After the discussion, Cuomo sue and an intern pretend to be porters and sneak into the warehouse to collect evidence. The two have been selected for this mission because Yuan doesn't recognize them in person, so even if he saw them in the warehouse, he wouldn't have any suspicion. However, the plan doesn't work, as Cuomo sue discovers that the batch of meat is all fresh. Yuan remembers Song mentioning a batch of low-priced beef that had arrived a couple of days ago. So without wasting any time, the group rushes to another warehouse, where they find Yuan and his goons overseeing the meat supply. En immediately brings out her cell phone and starts to record the insidious act. This enrages the director, and he orders his men to confiscate the phone. However, before they can do so, the cops show up and arrest all the bad guys. After the meat problem is fixed, the Sanjiao Group's reputation suffers, and it is no longer a threat to the P&E company. This prompts Mama Mutant to breathe a sigh of relief, and she finally decides to retire from the business. Now that everything's settled, Yuan wants to take his relationship with N further. He first sneaks inside her home when she's sleeping and measures her finger size. Once he has it, he heads to buy a proper ring for her. Due to N's influential work at the P&E company, a big firm wants to hire her, and they offer her an attractive package. However, our heroine politely refuses. Although she likes money, she prefers to be with her friends and grow a dar studio together. Kwa Maoshu and the others are very pleased when they learn about her decision. They also forgive Jinjin and hire her back to the studio. N happily accepts her, and is even more delighted that she has grown a lot. In the meantime, Chowie discovers that she's pregnant with Song's baby. Initially, she's worried about how he might take the news. When she reveals the news to him, he starts dancing, excited about being a father, and also believes it's the right time to formally reciprocate Yuan's feelings. With the help of Kwa Maoshu and the others, she perfectly decorates the studio and proposes to him. Much to everyone's surprise, Yuan has also bought a wedding ring for her. The two then exchange rings and kiss passionately. Thanks for watching this recap. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next movie recaps. Stay tuned for more exciting recaps.